Hi everyone! My name is Kiran and I'm a fourth year student studying immunology and health and disease at the University of Toronto. Today we're going to learn why some objects float in water and others sink by doing a floating egg experiment. Density is what controls the movement of the egg in this experiment, but we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Let's get started.
For this experiment, you'll need 3 glasses. I'm using empty jars, but any large glass is fine. Water, a half cup measuring cup, a lot of table salt, a spoon to mix, and the star of the show, 3 eggs. Let the eggs warm up to room temperature before we use them. To set up, we're going to fill the first glass up with water and then do the same for the second glass. Only fill the third glass about halfway up. Next, we're going to mix 1.5 cups of table salt into the second and third glasses. Give it a good mix to help the salt dissolve. You might have to stir for about a minute or 2. Now we've got our mixture ready for the eggs. Let's drop an egg into the first glass and see what happens. It sinks to the bottom. That's probably what you expected, right? Next, we'll carefully drop an egg into the second glass with salty water. This one floats right on top. Now for the last glass. You might need to give it an extra stir to make sure that the salt is dissolved. We can see that the egg also floats on top of the salty water. But let's see what happens when we add some more water. The egg sinks to the middle of the glass. The property that controls whether the egg floats, sinks, or floats halfway is density.
Density is a word used to describe the amount of space an object takes up, its volume, in relation to the amount of matter inside that object, its mass. If an object is heavy and compact, like a brick, it will have a high density. But if an object is light and takes up a lot of space, like a pillow, it will have a low density. When we first added the egg to the water, it sank all the way to the bottom. This happened because the density of the egg was higher than the density of the water, and the more dense an object is, the more it wants to sink to the bottom. But when we added salt to the water, the egg floated on the surface. What caused this change? By adding salt to the water, the sodium and chloride ions that make up the salt dissolved in the water and filled up the tiny gaps between the water molecules. This increased the mass of the solution without changing the volume that much. When there's enough salt added to the water, the density of the solution is now higher than the density of the egg, so the egg floats on the surface. But what about the third glass? In the beginning, the egg was floating on top of the surface because, like we just said, it was less dense than the saltwater solution. But when we added tap water, we actually lowered the density of the saltwater solution until it was almost equal to the density of the egg. This is why the egg floated in the middle of the glass. Here's a fun fact. In the Dead Sea, there's so much salt in the water that people float on their backs without trying and can even read a book. Differences in density can actually explain a lot of things you probably wondered about before. Like, why do helium balloons float, but not the balloons that we blow up ourselves? Helium gas is actually less dense than the air we breathe. So, just like the eggs in salt water, helium balloons want to float. Give this experiment a try at home, and if you want to see more experiments just like this, subscribe to Pueblo Science on Facebook and Instagram. Bye guys!